In 1975, two sisters walked to a shopping mall to look at Easter decorations and grab a bite to eat. They were never seen again. For 40 years, their faces haunted a community, their disappearance a constant painful question mark hanging over the suburbs of Washington, D.C. It was a case that broke hearts, baffled generations of police, and became a dark local legend. The file just kept getting thicker, the leads grew colder, and hope began to fade into history. But one detective, armed with fresh eyes and an unwavering will, refused to let their story end as a mystery. He looked at a file that everyone else had given up on, and somehow saw a path forward. This is the story of how a relentless cold case detective stared into the abyss of a 40-year-old crime and pulled the truth from a man who thought his secrets were buried forever. This is how he brought closure to the case of the Lyon Sisters. March 25th, 1975 was a bright spring day in Kensington, Maryland, a day that felt safe like any other. In the Lyon family home, 12-year-old Sheila and 10-year-old Catherine were excited. With Easter just around the corner, they planned a small adventure, a walk to the Wheaton Plaza shopping center, only half a mile from their house. Their goal was simple: see the holiday decorations and get a slice of pizza at a fast food spot called the Orange Bowl. Sheila, at 12, was responsible and caring. Her 10-year-old sister, Catherine, was her shadow, bright-eyed and full of life. They were good kids from a loving home. Their father, John Lyon, was a well-known local radio personality, his voice a familiar comfort to thousands in the D.C. area. Their mother, Mary, gave the girls clear instructions: be home by 4 p.m. It was a promise they would never be able to keep. The walk to Wheaton Plaza was a familiar one. In 1975, the suburbs were seen as a sanctuary. It was an era where kids had the freedom to roam their neighborhoods, where parents didn't think twice about letting their children walk to a nearby mall. The idea that two young girls could be snatched in broad daylight from a bustling public place was, for many, just unthinkable. It was a loss of innocence, not just for one family, but for an entire community. A chilling realization that the monsters you hear about in stories could be standing right next to you. That afternoon, as Sheila and Catherine set off on their walk, the world felt secure. By nightfall, that feeling would be shattered forever. The afternoon unfolded as planned, at least for a while. The sisters made it to the Wheaton Plaza and went to the Orange Bowl. Their older brother, who happened to be at the mall that day, later reported seeing them there seemingly untroubled. Another eyewitness, a friend of the sisters, saw them walking through the mall, just taking in the sights. The last confirmed sighting placed them walking home around 2 p.m., but 4 p.m. came and went, then 5 p.m., then 6. With each passing hour, the knot of worry in their mother's stomach tightened into pure dread. By 7 p.m., Mary Lyon knew something was terribly wrong and called the Montgomery County Police. What followed was one of the most desperate and extensive searches in the state's history. Police, firefighters, and an army of volunteers fanned out across the area. They combed through woods, peered into storm drains, and searched vacant houses for miles. The search was relentless, fueled by a community's collective hope and fear. But as hours turned into days and days into weeks, that hope began to run out. There was no sign of the girls, no ransom note, no credible leads. It was as if Sheila and Catherine Lyon had simply vanished from the face of the earth. The only sliver of a lead came from witnesses at the mall who remembered seeing the girls talking to an unidentified middle-aged man. One witness specifically recalled a man with a briefcase and a tape recorder, observing them with an unnerving intensity. A composite sketch was created and circulated, the face of a ghost who held the answers. The community held its breath, but the man in the sketch remained a phantom. The investigation, which had started with such urgency, slowly ground to a halt. In the frantic days after the girls vanished, police were flooded with tips. One of those came just a week later, on April 1st, 1975. An 18-year-old carnival worker named Lloyd Lee Welch Jr. contacted police claiming he'd seen the abduction. He gave an elaborate, overly detailed account of watching the girls get into a car with a man. The detectives at the time interviewed Welch and gave him a polygraph, which he failed. They dismissed his story as a lie, maybe a twisted attempt to inject himself into the investigation for attention. Welch was a drifter with a history of his own problems, and his story just seemed too theatrical to be true. He was noted in the files, but ultimately he wasn't considered a serious suspect. The investigation moved on.
For decades, this was the story of the Lyon Sisters case, a flurry of initial activity, followed by a long, painful silence. Generations of detectives inherited the case file, a thick record of dead ends. They would reread the witness statements, re-examine the scant evidence, and feel the same gnawing frustration. The case became a constant nagging reminder of a promise they couldn't keep. For the Lyon family, the pain was immeasurable. They kept their daughters' rooms just as they had left them, a shrine of hope against a tide of despair. They never moved, never changed their phone number, just in case their girls might one day come home. But the phone never rang. Years turned into decades. The world changed, children grew up, and the Wheaton Plaza itself was renovated and renamed. But the mystery of the Lyon Sisters remained frozen in time, a dark chapter in the community's history. The case became a cautionary tale told to new generations of children, a somber reminder of a time when the illusion of suburban safety was broken for good. The girls' smiling faces, plastered on missing person posters that eventually yellowed and faded, became a symbol of unresolved grief. For law enforcement, it was the ultimate cold case. The trail wasn't just cold, it was cryogenically frozen. Key witnesses had died or moved away, their memories clouded by the passage of 4 decades. The physical evidence, limited to begin with, offered no new avenues. The case file, containing thousands of pages of reports, sat in storage, a testament to a massive effort that had yielded nothing. The question of what happened to Sheila and Catherine Lyon seemed destined to remain unanswered forever, a wound that could never truly heal. In 2013, nearly 40 years after the sisters disappeared, the case landed on the desk of a new cold case team. Among them was Detective Dave Davis of the Montgomery County Police Department. Davis, along with Sergeant Chris Homrock and other detectives, was tasked with doing what so many had done before. Starting over, they specialized in laboring in a landscape beyond hope, and began the painstaking process of combing through the mountain of old files, looking for anything that might have been missed. It was in May 2013 that Detective Davis set fresh eyes on a 6-page report from April 1st, 1975. It was the transcript of the interview with the 18-year-old carnival worker, Lloyd Lee Welch Jr., the same one who'd been dismissed as a liar decades earlier, but this time the detectives saw something different. They weren't looking at Welch as a potential witness. They were looking at him as a potential suspect. They dug into his life since 1975 and discovered a deeply disturbing pattern. Welch had become a convicted sex offender, serving a long prison sentence in Delaware for assaulting a 10-year-old girl. This discovery was the spark. The detectives realized Welch's original story might not have been a complete lie. Liars often weave kernels of truth into their deceptions. What if Welch wasn't just a witness? What if he was there because he was involved? The cold case team, now operating under the name Operation Worthy Cause, had a focus. Their new hope wasn't a piece of DNA or a forgotten fingerprint. It was the man everyone had overlooked 4 decades ago. They decided it was time to pay Lloyd Welch a visit. On October 16, 2013, detectives Dave Davis and Chris Homrock traveled to a prison in Delaware to interview the man who had been a footnote in the case for 40 years. They were prepared for a difficult subject. Instead, Welch stunned them with the first words out of his mouth. With a sly grin, he said, "I know why you're here. You're here about those 2 missing kids." That single sentence kicked off a years-long series of interrogations. It was a masterclass in psychological strategy, a slow, grueling battle of wits between detectives and a manipulative, compulsive liar. Welch talked for 8 hours in that first session alone. He denied being directly involved, claiming he only witnessed the crime. He was talkative, almost eager to engage, spinning elaborate tales. The detectives, particularly Davis, adopted a patient approach, letting Welch talk, building a rapport, and listening for the inevitable cracks in his stories.
As the interviews continued, Welch's narrative kept shifting. He started pointing the finger at others, weaving a complex and contradictory web of blame that implicated several members of his own family. He named his uncle, Richard Welch, as the mastermind. He claimed the girls were taken from the mall to a house where they were assaulted and killed. The detectives knew he was lying about many details, but they also sensed he was circling a terrifying truth. He was telling them things only someone who was there could know. In one chilling moment, Detective Homrock asked Welch what he thought happened to the girls. Welch replied, "Well, my opinion is that he killed them and raped them. He killed them and he probably burned them." The other detectives were stunned. Who says burned them? It was a bizarrely specific detail, a slip that felt like a glimpse into a horrifying reality. The breakthrough wasn't a single aha moment, but a slow, agonizing extraction of truth from a web of lies. Over more than a dozen interviews, the detectives played a long game. They spent over 16,000 hours on the reinvestigation, issuing more than 50 search warrants and conducting over 100 interviews. They slowly built their case, piece by agonizing piece. While Welch never offered a full, straightforward confession, his stories, however contradictory, began to incriminate him more and more. He placed himself at the scene, luring the sisters away from the mall. From his shifting accounts, detectives pieced together a horrifying narrative. The girls were taken to a house in Maryland where they were abused, and their abduction was sexually motivated. The most horrific part of the story investigators built was what happened next. The girls were killed and their bodies were taken 220 miles away to a rugged wooded property his family owned on Taylor's Mountain in Virginia. There, investigators believe their bodies were dismembered and burned in a massive bonfire. This theory led investigators to the mountain. Relatives and locals came forward with chilling memories from that spring of 1975. One cousin remembered Welch bringing 2 large, heavy duffel bags with reddish-brown stains to the property, bags that smelled of decay, which he then helped Welch throw into a fire. Others recalled a fire that burned for days and emitted a terrible stench. For 40 years, the secrets of that mountain had stayed on that mountain. Now, they were finally coming out. With Welch's own incriminating statements and corroborating witness testimony, the case that had haunted a region for 4 decades finally had a legal resolution. In July 2015, Lloyd Lee Welch Jr. was formally indicted on 2 counts of first-degree felony murder. The wheels of justice, stuck for so long, were finally turning. The legal process culminated in September 2017. Facing a mountain of evidence, Lloyd Lee Welch Jr. pleaded guilty to his role in the murders. He was sentenced to 48 years in prison, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Justice, in the legal sense, had been delivered. At the sentencing, John Lyon, the girl's father, stood and thanked the cold case detectives. He said simply, "We just want to say thank you. It's been a long time." The Lyon Sisters case is a powerful story of persistence and the refusal to let a family's hope for answers die. It shows that even after decades of silence, justice can still be pursued. We'd like to hear your thoughts on the incredible dedication of this cold case team in the comments below. And if you find these stories of hard-won justice compelling, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what we uncover next. The conviction of Lloyd Lee Welch brought a legal end to the case, but it could never erase the tragedy. Despite extensive searches on Taylor's Mountain, the remains of Sheila and Catherine Lyon were never recovered. This final, painful piece of the puzzle remains missing, denying the Lyon family the chance to give their daughters a proper burial. The detectives themselves, while proud of their work, don't consider the outcome a complete success for this very reason. As Sergeant Chris Homrock said, even though we got a conviction, we still don't really consider this a success. We never really found the remains, which we wanted to bring home for the families. The case of the Lyon sisters left an indelible mark. Their disappearance marked a profound cultural shift, shattering the illusion of suburban safety and ushering in a new era of parental vigilance. The phrase stranger danger became a household term, and the freedom that children once enjoyed began to shrink. In the end, this is more than just a story about a crime. It's a story about memory, about a community that never forgot two little girls, and about a family that endured unimaginable pain with quiet dignity. And most of all, it's a story about a team of detectives who understood that justice has no expiration date. They looked into the past and, through sheer relentless dedication, ensured that Sheila and Catherine Lyon would be remembered not for an unsolvable mystery, but as two bright shining girls for whom justice was finally, after 40 long years, delivered.